Okay, moms, this is going to rattle you, I promise. I want you to imagine that your teen and his buddies get the bright idea that teens often do to break into a neighbor's house after school. Nobody's home, right? So who could it hurt? Well, it's called burglary. That is until the owner turns out to be at home and shoots one of the teens and shoots him dead. Then it's called murder. A murder that the other boys can be blamed for. This can and did happen to a group of 4 Indiana teens tagged the Elkhart 4. The teenage boys find themselves sentenced to 45 to 55 years behind bars for the murder of one of their friends. Take a look.
It's a bunch of bull. Go catch people who really murdered somebody. Wanna die.
Emotions exploded the night Blake Lehman, Levi Sparks, and Anthony Sharp became convicted murderers.
It was a burglary that ended in bloodshed inside this Elkhart home. The 4 Elkhart County teens who did it going to prison for murder. They didn't kill anyone.
Here, the homeowners shot one of the intruders, not the other way around.
People breaking into homes got to stop, and we're going to use every available measure under the law to stop it.
In this case, Elkhart County prosecutor Curtis Hill did, charging the boys with murder since 21-year-old Danzel Johnson died while his friends committed a felony, even though they didn't have a gun or pull the trigger. Raw, uncontrollable agony poured out of the courthouse. Surrounded by police officers, the prosecutor escorted jurors to their cars. Some of them cried and were visibly shaken while the judge read the verdict.
The judge sentenced Blake Lehman and Anthony Sharp to 55 years in prison. Levi Sparks got 50 years. Jose Quiroz took a plea deal. He is serving 45 years.
Well, the boys' mothers are outraged. They say their sons should not have to pay the price for a crime they did not commit, especially murder.
My son Jose was 16 years old at the time of the incident.
Blake was 16 when the crime happened.
Levi was 17 years old at the time of the robbery.
My son does not deserve to be charged with murder because he and the other boys did not commit murder.
I know what the boys did was wrong, but stealing is not killing.
None of the boys feel responsible for Danzel's death because they did not kill him.
The day of the robbery, the police show up at my door. They told me there was a shooting and somebody's not going to make it out of the house alive. They said, ma'am, your son is in custody at the police station.
I got a phone call stating that something had happened on my street. There was ambulance. Police called me and I said, is my son alive? And he's like, yes, he's alive. He has been shot and treated, but he is at the county jail now.
I received a phone call from the Elkhart City Police asking me if I would bring Levi in for questioning.
When I finally did see my son, he was covered in blood. My son kept saying to me that Danzel had died, and all he kept repeating was, Mama, I didn't kill anybody. Mama, I didn't kill anybody. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to see my son. A detective came out and said, no, you will not be seeing your son. We're charged with murder. And I was like, murder? And he was like, another boy is dead. Just be happy yours is alive.
They told my son they were charging Jose with murder, and he was not going home. We were just hugging each other as tight as we could, like there was no tomorrow.
I was in shock. I couldn't sleep for days.
5 days after the incident, Levi was arrested for murder. Never in my wildest dream that he was going to be arrested for this. It ripped my heart out.
When the prosecutor announced that he was charging all the boys with felony murder, I was in shock. I ran to the porch and I actually threw up.
Jose was offered a plea deal. I had my son take the plea bargain deal. He was being threatened with a gang enhancement charge.
I am so worried about, going to prison.
If Levi has to serve the full 50 years, I will not be alive to see him ever walk out.
These boys made a mistake, but they did not murder someone.
It's like a nightmare that you can't wake up from.
I was devastated. That's my only child.
Okay, Angie, April, Rebecca, I wish we were meeting under happier circumstances, but we're not. This just happened recently. It's fresh and raw for you guys. Why is this unjust in your view? I mean, these boys were committing a crime, and in the process of committing this crime, a death occurred. Someone was killed.
Boys didn't murder anyone.
The crime that was committed was a burglary. It just so happened to be that Denzel died, and it was not because of our boy.
Well, he didn't just die. He didn't just like have a heart attack.
Exactly.
He was shot and killed by the homeowner, right?
Yet, yet they went in there assuming that no one was there, so it was just, they had planned on just doing a burglary. That was it.
Right.
And
now, your son was not in the house. He was where?
he was across the street.
Was he a lookout?
I do not know if he was or not.
Did he communicate with them while they were in the house?
No, he did not.
Did he run over there and go inside the house when he
No.
heard gunshots?
No, he did not.
Did he have prior knowledge of it?
Yes,
So he knew it was happening.
yes.
But he had enough guts to stay back and
Yeah.
not participate.
Were these boys thugs?
No.
No, not at all.
Then why are they burglarizing somebody's house?
Sitting around bored and just doing something very, very stupid.
You look at them, they look like clean-cut kids. I understand that there were no character witnesses called.
No.
No.
Were there any witnesses called?
No, not for our side.
You put on no defense. You called no witnesses. Why?
I had a list that I sent to my lawyer of character witnesses that would have been more than happy to speak on Blake's behalf, and they never did call any witnesses for us.
Well, Vincent Campiti is here. He is Levi's attorney. So you represented Levi,
I did.
right? And that's April's son. Was there no defense put on here?
I think there was a defense, and defense came clearly through the cross-examination, the argument with regards to jury instructions, et cetera. When you talk about a defense, meaning witnesses, the question becomes a bit different, and the idea as to whether or not these boys were thugs goes to whether or not they had criminal backgrounds. With regards to Levi himself, I got testimony from one of the investigating officers, admitted my client had no prior criminal history, no prior juvenile criminal history, other than something related to a fight he had at school. When we talk about witnesses themselves, the only witnesses were the boys themselves. They were tried together. Their statements could not be used against one another based on what the prosecutor had to offer because of various case law in Indiana. The way the law was set up in this case, our frank philosophy from my perspective was, I believe we have a 50-50 chance. Really what you're going in for is hoping, and I don't disagree with you, Dr. Phil, that yes, it would have been great to have several people there to talk about the kids, their backgrounds, et cetera, but frankly, none were willing to come forward.
Okay, listen, I'm not trying to armchair quarterback you. I'm just talking about from a jury perspective. I know that jury wanted to hear from those boys. They wanted to hear from somebody to tell you something about the character of those boys. Let's talk about felony murder, because maybe this is confusing to some of you. A rule of law that holds that if a killing occurs during the commission of or attempted commission of a felony, which is some major crime, the person or persons responsible for the felony can be charged with a murder. And you think that's unfair?
Totally.
Yes.
Okay, but understand, you said they didn't kill Denzel. But there's an element of law, and I think the words are even in this jury charge, that you have to think about, and that is the but-for test. But for them entering that house, would Denzel have been shot by that homeowner? And the answer is no. We've got to take a quick break. When we come back, they didn't testify at their own trials, and they have never spoken publicly about their controversial murder conviction. But we are going to talk to them. They are going to get their side of the story out, because coming up live from behind bars, we are going to meet 17-year-old Blake, 18-year-old Levi, and 19-year-old Anthony, who are all facing 50 years plus, even though they never pulled the trigger. We'll be right back.
Monday on an all-new Dr. Phil.
In order for us to be here today, I had to drop a restraining order.
If your marriage was this broken,
He had me pinned down on the couch.
He went up with a broken nose and 2 black eyes, and he went to jail.
what would you do to fix it?
Your last effort to save your marriage was to get a 3-way.
Yes, in my head, I was like, maybe she needs another woman.
I did agree to it, and that was a mistake.
You think?
America's most watched talk show. That's Monday.
These 3 Elkhart County teenagers are now convicted murderers, even though they didn't pull the trigger.
There are so many people that want to see my son Jose and the other 3 boys involved rot in prison for murder. They lost a friend just like Denzel's mother lost a son. They are suffering just like we as mothers are suffering. So where is the justice in this?
There were rallies, petitions signed, and a website called Free the Elkhart 4 as friends begged prosecutors to drop felony murder charges against the 4 teenagers. But the murder charges weren't dropped. One of the teens took a plea deal. The other 3 boys went to trial and were convicted. They did not testify at their trial. They have never spoken publicly since the day this happened. Speaking out for the first time via satellite from prison are 17-year-old Blake, 18-year-old Levi, and 19-year-old Anthony. You've not spoken since this trial happened. Let me start with you, Blake. How do you feel about the fact that you have been convicted of murder, yet were not armed and never pulled the trigger?
I feel like it's wrong. I feel like what we did, we committed a burglary. We didn't kill anyone.
Levi, there has been conflicting testimony about whether you were even in the house or not. How do you feel about sitting there with a murder conviction if you weren't even in the house?
I feel the same way. I feel like we shouldn't have been charged with it, and I feel like it should have been a burglary charge. But on my part, I can't really say much about my part.
Anthony, how do you feel about the fact that you have a murder conviction on you at this point?
I feel the same way as the other 2 boys, that it's a cruel and unusual punishment for us, and like what we should have been charged with was actually a burglary instead of murder, because we didn't pull the trigger or kill nobody, and I just feel the same as the other 2 boys.
Your mothers are here, Blake and Levi. Anthony, your mother is not here. I asked them if you guys were thugs, if you were bad boys with a bad history, just out wreaking havoc on a community as criminals, and they say absolutely, unequivocally, no, that was not the case. So let me ask you, I'll start with you, Blake. What the hell were you doing breaking into some man's house in the middle of the afternoon? What were you thinking?
Honestly, when I look back on it, I feel like I wasn't thinking at all. You know, the idea came up, and I kind of just went with it, you know, kind of wasn't really using my head at all.
What did you do in this, Levi? Why did you not go in the house?
I just felt like I just didn't want to do it. I just decided that I just didn't want to. It's just not my type of environment to go break into people's houses.
What does it mean, do a lick?
It means to break into a house.
How do you know that?
It just the people. I just hear it like when I was at school or I was out just hanging out with people. They would say that type of term, and eventually I just got to knowing.
So that's just a street term for burglarizing a house, do a lick. And that's what your son said in his statement to the police, right?
They said they were
You've read that. He said we were just going to do a lick, which
doesn't mean that he was the one that made it up, but yeah.
No, but it doesn't sound like, that's certainly not choir boy lingo.
No.
So, Blake, you and Anthony, along with 2 others, enter the back door of the house, correct?
Correct.
And that door was locked?
Yeah.
Was there a vehicle parked in the driveway?
No. There was a truck sitting in the backyard that, but from what I understood, that wasn't his vehicle, or it wasn't the car he drove, the homeowner.
All right, and I understand that when you came in, his watch and wallet were on the counter.
Right.
Did that suggest to you that he was home?
At the time, I guess my adrenaline was pumping, and like I said, I wasn't thinking. I didn't think anything of it at the time.
Okay.
I picked it up, and that was really it.
So you see, in retrospect, that's a pretty common sense indication that the man's home if his watch and wallet,
I mean, yeah,
are on the counter.
Yeah, after I you know, look back at it now and take my, you know, in the moment, I see how I didn't see it, but now I kind of, you know, but at the same time, I can see someone leaving their wallet at home too, so I'm not sure at that moment if I would have thought of it or not.
Yeah. All right, I understand. We've got to take a quick break. Do these boys feel at all responsible for the death of their friend? I'm going to ask that next. Plus, a juror from the trial. The boys will hear for the first time why a jury says they convicted them of felony murder, knowing they could face life in prison. And we're going to find out if it was an easy decision, how the jury felt about the age of the boys, and why they picked murder over burglary. Plus, I'm going to let these mothers speak to their sons. We'll be right back.
90% of the jurors considered their age, but age wasn't a part of it. You had to put that off to the side. We had no choice but to convict them of felony murder. From a human standpoint, it was absolutely horrible.
I had never heard of felony murder until the boys have been charged with it.
It was unbelievable that the prosecutor would decide to charge these boys with their friend's murder.
I believe our prosecutor was looking to have somebody punished for this crime. They were looking for somebody to go down.
On October 3rd, 2012, 5 young men attempted to burglarize a home, and the homeowner shot and killed one of them. Now, due to the felony murder rule, the 4 were charged with their friend's murder. It was a trial that the entire town of Elkhart, Indiana was talking about, and when Walter was picked to be a jury member, he had no idea just how difficult it was going to be.
The jury in this case had the opportunity to make a determination of whether or not felony murder was the right choice, and we feel that the jury did the right thing.
Prior to the court case, I didn't even know that felony murder charge existed. The trial itself lasted 4 days. The prosecution was trying to prove that the boys were in the house to commit a burglary and that the homeowner was trying to protect his rights. The boys never testified in their defense. Based on the police reports, several of the boys were sitting at Jose's house and they decided that they were going to rob somebody, so a couple of them went up and down the street knocking on doors to see if anybody was home, and then they came up with the decision that they were going to rob the house across the street. They went around and back and saw the homeowner's truck parked in the outside driveway, and then as they broke into the house, the homeowner's wallet and watch were sitting on the counter. The homeowner testified about hearing the 3 booms come down the stairs, scared to death, and seeing somebody bolt through his house when he fired the first shot, seeing the other boys in the bedroom, and he thought he had them corralled, and that's when he started calling 911. Danzel was shot through the chest. Blake was shot in the leg. When we went in to deliberate, the judge told us there was 4 things that we needed to consider to come to the verdict of felony murder. First one, was there a felony committed? Number 2, were all the boys involved? Number 3, did a death occur during the commission of a felony? Number 4, did the boys perceive there's imminent danger? Imminent danger means that you have a perceived fear that someone might get hurt in the commission of that burglary. We were in a jury room for 5 hours. 2 of the jurors didn't feel the kids were in imminent danger, But we all decided that because the boys saw the truck outside in the driveway, saw the watch and the wallet sitting right on the counter just inside the door, that it was a very good chance that somebody was going to be home. And that means there's a possibility of imminent danger. We, as a jury, had no choice but to convict him of felony murder. 90% of the jurors considered their age at the time. It was hard to look at them as adult criminals. And you looked at the guidelines, age wasn't a part of it, and so you had to put that off to the side. It was a tough decision. Once you swear to uphold the law, you have to dismiss your personal feelings. From a human standpoint, it was absolutely horrible. When we finally were able to come up with a verdict, we held hands, all said a prayer for the kids and the families. Knowing you're sending 16 or 17-year-old boys to jail for 55 years, tough.
It is very clear to me this was a difficult decision for you.
It was very difficult.
It was painful for you.
Painful. I was still torn.
Yeah. And you realized when you applied the law, as per your instructions from the judge, that you were sending these boys to jail essentially for the rest of their lives. If they serve out their time, they'll be 50, 60 years old when they get out. Their entire life will have passed with them being in prison.
It was a very hard decision.
How do you feel as you sit here across from these mothers, which I'm very thankful for your willingness to do, but how do you feel as you sit across from these mothers here?
I'm sorry it ended up the way it did. You know, we did the best we could do with what we had to work with. And seeing the boys on TV, that's the first time I even heard them say anything.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how much of a difference it would have made if they would have talked or, you know, had some people give some references for them or whatever, but under the way the law's written, once we got to the burglary stage of it, and it stepped, you know, then we started looking at the 4 things that fell under the category of felony murder. It was, the imminent danger part of it was a real sticking point for us, and it took us quite a while to get past that. If you've never been on a jury before, it's a very difficult process.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think about the fact that they took care to try and find a house that wasn't occupied? So therefore, they were looking for an unoccupied dwelling and then settled on this one. So it was in their mind, don't want to encounter anybody, and so this was the house they finally chose. If they were looking for a house that wasn't occupied, why would they ignore the signs that there was somebody there and go into this one? They had choices, right?
They had choices, exactly. And because they did knock on the door, they knew there was a possibility of imminent danger whether somebody was there or not, because they're just like what happened. He could have been upstairs asleep. They weren't sure, but...
And they didn't get an answer.
They didn't get an answer, correct.
So therefore, they could reasonably, you could extrude that to say that they therefore assumed there was nobody home, and your test of imminent danger would be if the homeowner was home and could therefore confront and react.
Correct.
So if they knocked and no answer, then doesn't that fit the definition of them assuming there was nobody there?
Sure, they assumed that, but there's always that possibility that somebody could be there, and by them previously checking, that's where we got to the point of the imminent danger possibility.
What Blake has explained and what Angie's kind of saying under her breath over here quite rightly, you're right about this.
He's a 16-year-old boy.
This is a 16-year-old boy. And
I know,
you know,
and that weighed heavily on everybody, believe me.
But you've spent your life, as have I, you know, wallet, watch, you get your stuff and go, you know.
Exactly.
And you're out. But at 16, you don't have those patterns necessarily etched in your brain. You're scared, adrenaline's pumping. You go in there, you don't know whether the guy's home or not. If he had gotten on the stand and made a compelling story to say, I'm wrong and I'm sorry and we shouldn't have done this. But I'll guarantee you I didn't know that man was home, or I'd have never gone in that house. I'd have run like a rabbit. I'd have been out of there. I didn't know it, and by the time I did, I was looking down the barrel of a gun. If he had made that compelling argument, you would have considered that in the jury room.
Sure, we would have considered it.
It would have given you ammunition.
So, yeah, I mean, if you don't hear anything, you pretty much got to take it with what you do here, and that's where you have to go with it.
There was no chance for me to make it out of that house. I never heard the man coming. The first thing I heard was gunshots.
Angie, you see your son right there.
Yeah.
What would you like to say to him?
Oh, God, I miss him so much. I love you, son. I love all y'all.
I love you too, Mom. I miss you.
I know, I miss you too, baby.
I love you too.
Man, I love you guys. I miss you guys. I don't know what you guys were thinking that day. I want to smack all three of y'all in the back of the head, really, but I'm proud of you guys for being strong through this, because this has been hard. You guys have really been strong. I want you guys to stay focused. Keep doing what you're doing. Get down there and get your GED, get your education. Just stay strong, guys, and we're going to keep fighting.
April, what did you want to say to Levi?
Oh, first of all, I love him very much, and I miss him. Miss all of them.
I love you too. The juror, he said, you know, like we had a chance to leave. There was no chance for, you know, anyone, there was no chance for me to make it out of that house. I think if I'd have tried, you know, I wouldn't be here today. I was stuck, and there was no getting out. The house is so small, and I never heard the man coming. The first thing I heard was gunshots, and you know, my immediate reaction was to turn around and run the other way. So I just felt like I just wanted to say that there was no getting out.
I would like to. I agree with him, and luckily, I barely made it out the house. And as you can see, he shot a fire. He fired a shot. The homeowner fired a shot towards me as well.
Blake, you were with Denzel. Yeah. You were with Denzel when he died.
Yeah.
How did that affect you?
I mean, it was traumatizing. I was shocked. I was frozen. The only thing I could do was kept repeating, he's dead, and I didn't know what to do.
You were actually right there beside him when he passed. Did he say anything to you?
No. As I understand it, he was, I guess, you know, choking. Like he couldn't get a breath in. There was no time for him to say anything. And
were you shot already at that time? Had you been shot, or were you shot subsequent to that?
Yeah, Denzel was shot first, and then I was shot after him. I actually didn't realize it at the point in time because my adrenaline and the fact that, you know, I was so scared. But I later realized that I was shot.
Did it bother you at all that the homeowner said that he was not afraid and that the boys were running away from him, not towards him when he fired the gun?
I think at first he wasn't afraid, but once he saw them and he was aware they were there, I think because he thought it was an explosion at first, according to his testimony.
Well, that's what I always do when I hear an explosion, is grab my gun.
Well, then supposedly he heard some noises too, inside the house, and that's when he grabbed his cell phone and gun and started making noise going down the steps. Yeah. I think that's how the testimony went.
Yeah, well, if he armed himself for some reason.
Right, that's because he heard noises in the house.
But, and I think his testimony was that the boys were running away from him when they saw him. They weren't charging him.
Exactly.
Like a home invasion, they were running away from him.
Right, and when he started the fire, he was just trying to corral him in that bedroom, not trying to harm him, just trying to get him in there so he could call 911 and say, hey, I got a problem here.
On trial, was it not said that the bullet holes were in the closet? Remember at trial, it was stated many times that he shot in the closet?
That was part of the testimony.
So how would you not mean to shoot I'm not
Well,
understanding that fact, but okay.
I can't answer that question.
I know.
So your thinking is that he herded at least two of them into the closet and shot them in the closet.
In trial, that's exactly how it was brought up. There was no blood anywhere in the house but at the closet. They were running from him. They were going to the closet to hide. Jose was already in the closet. He never seen Jose. Once the boys got into that bedroom, he shot at them. Denzel got shot right before the closet. Blake was helping Denzel in the closet, got shot in the back of the leg. The bullet holes were proven to be in the closet.
Next, find out why former federal prosecutor Sonny Hostin says it is ridiculous to defend these boys' actions and that they are, in fact, murderers. And if the prosecutor was making an example of them, he had a right to.
Monday on an all-new Dr. Phil.
He wound up with a broken nose and two black eyes.
A volatile marriage.
You headbutted me in the face.
It was an accident.
How do you accidentally headbutt someone?
That's Monday.
The families of the Elkhart Four believe the prosecutor had it out for their sons and that they should have never been charged with felony murder, a crime they say the boys didn't commit. They say that at the most, the boys should have only been convicted of burglary. Now, joining us now is former prosecutor and CNN legal analyst Sonny Hostin. Sonny, thanks for joining us again. We always love it when you are on the show. Appreciate you being here. You've been listening to everything, right?
Yeah, I have been, Dr. Phil. And I think what's been so shocking to me, especially as someone who has prosecuted many, many cases, is that I'm hearing everyone is to blame, right? It's the law's fault. It's the defense attorney's fault for not calling some of these boys to the witness stand. It's the homeowner's fault for sort of creeping down the stairs and then opening fire. It's everyone's fault, Dr. Phil, except for the boys' fault. And that really is where the fault lies. They chose to burglarize a home. There's always the possibility that someone is home. And I've got to tell you, I look at this as a home invasion. I look at this from the perspective of the victim. Imagine being asleep in a small home and having 5 young men in your house. I mean, imagine the terror, imagine the trauma of something like that. It is the boys' fault that their friend is dead. It is the boys' fault that their mothers are in so much pain, that this juror is in pain, that the victim is likely in pain. It is all their fault, and I haven't seen them once accept responsibility. Everyone is calling this just a burglary. Well, it's not. It's felony.
She's kind of saying what I said to begin with. But for them choosing to do this, somebody wouldn't be dead, and so they're the first link in the chain.
And I understand the law, how it's written and how you can conceive it, but these boys were also juveniles, while the one that's deceased is 21. He made his own choice to go in that house also. How should they be charged for his death? I mean, to me, they all should be responsible for their own life when they chose to go in that house.
Well, Sonny, I'll let you respond.
Again, it's the boys' fault. They all decided together to commit a crime, a home invasion, a burglary. And the law provides that if someone dies during the commission of that, you are responsible for it. I've got to tell you, Dr. Phil, I don't think that we would all be here talking about this if the homeowner died, right? If the homeowner died, this would be classic felony murder. And I gotta say, this is just a typical felony murder case. If you've got a group of boys that walk into a store and they try to burglarize the store, even without guns, and let's say there's a fight that ensues with the store clerk gets beaten up, dies, they're all responsible for it. It is no different because one of the burglars died. His blood is on their hands.
If you're going to be in the Los Angeles area and you would like free tickets, go to drphil.com and click on Be in the Audience.
Or call 323-461-PHIL. Is what you want to say, Vincent?
Thank you, Doctor. What I wanted to say was simply that I would disagree that this is a typical felony murder, especially in the state of Indiana. If you take a look at the case law in the state of Indiana, in fact, it's absolutely atypical. The typical is when the victim is normally a third party, not an accomplice. And the distinction is this, and the real question here is, under Indiana law, this would have only been an A felony burglary, a difference between 45 years and 20 years if, during the commission of the crime, a person was seriously injured, except for one of the defendants. So the point here is why, if you're analyzing burglary, is there an exception under Indiana law if a person injured is one of the accomplices, but that same exception doesn't apply for felony murder? And so the whole point of this trial was, I personally did not have a real hope, because I agree with the juror, that in fact, under the law, they had to find felony murder once they got the burglary. The issue is on the appeal. And the only way you get this kind of case to appeal is by going through a trial. And unfortunately, I think that's where the case is. And what we're looking at is changing the law under appeal and or having the legislature change it, because it clearly, I think, is absurd to apply it under these facts. And that's what I wanted to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sonny, any response?
Yeah, it is typical felony murder. It is typical felony murder. You see it all over the country. The fact that a co-defendant, a co-conspirator dies during the commission of a felony makes no difference. It makes no difference whether it's the victim. It makes no difference whether or not it's a co-defendant, co-conspirator. It's what is foreseeable. And I think their mothers, and I'm a mother as well, have to understand that they must be held accountable
for the crime they committed.
All right, Sonny, let me ask you.
Which is felony murder.
Let me ask you a question right before we go to break. You refer to these three as boys. You see them, you look at them, you refer to them as boys. You haven't referred to them as men. The fact that they are teenagers, I know neurologically that their brains are not fully developed at this point. Is this too harsh to hold these boys accountable for 50-plus years for what happened in this case?
You know, I agree with your assessment, Dr. Phil, that, you know, and I've seen all of the studies, and I've spoken to Sanjay Gupta at CNN about this very issue, criminalizing behavior under the age of 25. And we know that the brain really fully develops in terms of criminal consequences at the age of 25. I do think 50 years is harsh. I think it's very harsh. I think if there is anything that should be done here is perhaps to attack the length of the sentence. I think that when we sentence criminals, when we sentence boys, young men, I do think that age should be something that is taken into account.
All right, next, how do viewers feel about the felony murder law, the boys' murder conviction, and the fact that these teens will be spending most of their life in prison? Do you agree with the moms here that this law is just too harsh, or is it exactly what Sonny says, put into place for crimes just like this? We'll find out what we think, and I want to ask the studio audience when we come back. Stop justifying your inactivity and avoiding the challenge of change. For help getting started, go to drphil.com for 11 seasons of advice, articles, and exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Plus, sign up for the Dr. Phil community to share your story and find support from others, all on drphil.com. Well, I want to see what our viewers have been talking about during today's show. To begin with. So let's take a look at some tweets. Tina M. Cummings says, don't think these kids deserve 50 years, but they certainly deserve to be in prison. A boy died because of their actions. Helen Lusk, 1957, says, the best things the boys can do is do whatever education and good they can while they're behind bars. So certainly that's the case. I'm curious from the studio audience. If you think this was a just outcome, raise your hand. Wow, like 3 people. If you think no, this is a miscarriage of justice, raise your hand. Wow, almost everyone here, I assume y'all have both hands up. And boys, I didn't see y'all raise your hands on the satellite, but I'm sure. There we go. Yeah, all right. Listen, I can tell you that I believe that the jury system works. And I believe that this man did his job. I think he did it with compassion. I think he did it with care. And I think he followed the instructions of the court. For my 2 cents worth, I am big on accountability. I absolutely, unequivocally think people should be held accountable for their actions and be held to pay for what they have done. I think that this is a sentencing that has gone crazy. I do not believe that this is a just outcome for these boys. We do have a statement from the prosecutor on the website. If you want to hear what this prosecutor says, we'll have it there. Boys, I wish you all the very best, and hopefully we will see you back out here long before your sentences have all been served. And